The Middle East is burning again. Beginning in October of 2023, a resurgence of full-scale war in Gaza has ignited the embers of decades-long conflicts throughout the wider region and brought back the question: why are there so many wars in the Middle East? And what makes the Middle East different from other regions of the world in terms of violence and the sheer number, scale, and longevity of wars? In this video, we will try to understand the causes of conflicts in the Middle East and some commonalities between them. Without further ado, let's dive right in.
Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible.
Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, several scholars have cited the concept of Middle East exceptionalism as the reason behind the endemic instability. Middle East exceptionalism is, in essence, the idea that the Middle East hosts a unique combination of factors that make it prone to conflict. These factors include the ethnic and religious composition of the region, its unique geographic location, and the abundance of natural resources. These factors, alongside other considerations, have made the Middle East different from all the other regions and turned it into a violent and conflict-prone area full of autocratic regimes notorious for their corruption, poor governance, and human rights abuses. This, however, begs the question: is the Middle East indeed the most conflict-prone region in the world, as the narrative goes? It actually is not. According to the joint research project of the Uppsala University and the Peace Research Institute of Oslo, which covered the period of 1946 to 2008, the Middle East and Asia were the 2 most conflict-ridden regions in the world throughout the Cold War. However, after the Cold War, the number of conflicts in the rest of Africa and Asia has exceeded that of the Middle East. Even though this finding may refute the claim that the Middle East is somehow more violent, chaotic, and dangerous than any other region in the world, it does not reject the fact that too many wars indeed occur in the Middle East. Why is this the case? Let's find the common causes of conflicts in the Middle East, bearing in mind that some of these commonalities often overlap. The first common cause is obvious. Ever since the emergence of Israel as an independent state in the Middle East in 1948, its existence has been rejected by the vast majority of Arab countries. 9 large-scale wars and conflicts have been fought between Israel on one side and the combination of Arab states, Palestinian, and other Arab military political organizations on the other. The common cause of the initial Arab-Israeli wars was the rejection of the State of Israel by the Arab states, which was later inflamed by the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the Israeli rejection of the State of Palestine. This major impasse between the sides is undoubtedly one of the causes of the current war in Gaza, and low-intensity conflicts with Hezbollah on the border with Lebanon, with the Houthis of Yemen, with Iran. Throughout the years, several Arab countries have recognized Israel, acknowledging the reality on the ground. Egypt was the first to do that in 1979, and was later followed by Jordan in 1994. Most recently, 4 other states, the United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Morocco, and Bahrain, have recognized the sovereignty of Israel in a deal brokered by the United States. At the same time, Saudi Arabia came very close to doing the same thing before the war in Gaza started. Israel and Palestine have also come very close to a peace agreement several times, but ultimately, every attempt at peace has fallen short, due to local opposition or the inability to navigate through mutually exclusive demands. The Israeli-Palestinian question has caused wars between Israel and the Arab states, between Israel and Palestinian organizations like the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Hamas, and between Israel and other anti-Israeli organizations like Hezbollah, along with causing major tension and, at times, blood between Israel and Iran. Moreover, the exile of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon ultimately caused tension with the Christian elite of that country, leading to the Lebanese Civil War in 1975. It is difficult to expect this cause of war in the Middle East to disappear before a fair and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian question is found. Israelis want security, while Palestinians want their own state. Until an acceptable formula, including both of these considerations, is found, the issue will likely continue to cause war in the Middle East. By extension, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has also exacerbated the tensions between Iran and the United States. Iran used to be one of the staunchest American allies in the Middle East during the reign of the Pahlavi dynasty in the Cold War era. However, this alliance did not help alleviate the deep-seated animosity towards the United States and the West in large portions of Iranian society. The leftists in Iran disliked America for its role in orchestrating a coup against the democratically elected former leader of Iran, Mossadegh, in 1953. The conservative religious groups disliked America by default, and when these two groups led the revolution against the monarchy, with the latter group seizing power in Iran, the United States became the number one enemy of the new Islamic regime. Under the rule of the Islamic Ayatollahs, the mullahs called America the Great Satan. Thus, hostilities between America and Iran began, with both sides engaging in harming each other right from the get-go. The Islamist regime captured the American embassy in 1979 and held 52 American diplomats as hostages for 444 days, while the United States openly supported the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, who attacked Iran in 1980, trying to take advantage of the revolutionary turmoil in the country. Despite several periods of thaw in the Iran-US relations, these countries have been engaged in a low-intensity conflict throughout the Middle East ever since the Iranian Revolution. Iran supported the anti-American groups in Iraq during the American occupation of that country. Since the start of the war in Gaza, American military assets have been under constant fire from the Iranian-backed groups in Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea. Obviously, the United States have not been sitting idle either, with the targeted killing of the Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani being the highlight of their anti-Iranian activities. So while the animosity between Iran and America has not directly led to a major conflict in the Middle East, it has always been a factor behind tensions in the Middle East and has often made conflicts worse. When we talk about America's involvement in the Middle East, it is impossible to ignore oil as a major factor of conflict. The Middle East is home to almost half of the world's oil, which has been the single most important natural resource of the 21st century. Thus, it is very tempting to blame most of the wars in the Middle East on oil and the foreign desire to control it. But, as it usually is, the answer is more complicated. Some of the wars in the Middle East have absolutely nothing to do with oil. The primary cause of the Arab-Israeli wars is not oil. The same is true for the civil wars in Yemen and Lebanon. Having said that, oil has definitely been the major and sometimes the primary cause of some wars. Control over the oil fields and oil transportation was one of the major considerations of Saddam Hussein when he decided to invade Iran in 1980. Of course, Iran's public posturing in favor of the expansion of the Islamic Revolution to Iraq and Saddam Hussein's intention to dismantle the new regime before it threatened his power was another crucial cause of this war. However, the oil-rich regions of Basra, Abadan, and the shore of the Persian Gulf were among the main targets of the belligerents, who wanted to strike their adversary in the place it hurt most, their oil industry. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990 was, in a way, an extension of the Iran-Iraq war. Iraq took big loans from another oil-rich Middle Eastern state of Kuwait, and was not in a position to repay them after a costly war. The leading cause of this war was Saddam's intention to get out of debt and restore his war-torn economy by taking over Kuwait's lucrative oil reserves. The Iraqi invasion was eventually defeated by the American-led coalition in the conflict known as the Gulf War. And very soon, this confrontation with Saddam became one of the driving factors behind America's war on terror. Iraq was invaded by American forces in 2003, as the United States accused Iraq of developing weapons of mass destruction and supporting terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda. This rationale was later rejected, and ever since, the real cause of the American invasion has been hotly debated. This perhaps deserves its own video, since the topic is so vast and controversial, but many are content with blaming everything on oil, and the perceived American obsession with control over the Middle Eastern oil reserves. This may be an oversimplification of matters, but it would also be wrong to completely deny the existence of the oil factor behind the American decision to invade Iraq. President George W. Bush, his Vice President Dick Cheney, the National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, and several other members of the Bush administration had close ties with the American oil industry. Several statements of the US officials at the time indicate that the oil factor was definitely part of the equation, including the former CENTCOM commander General John Abizaid's quote, "Of course, it's about oil. We cannot really deny that," which was said in reference to the invasion of Iraq. But at the same time, there is not a single declassified document or any other evidence directly pointing to the Bush administration deciding to invade Iraq simply to take control over the Iraqi oil. The fact that in the late 2000s, Chinese and Russian oil companies started securing contracts to work the Iraqi oil fields also indicates that Americans were in Iraq not just because they wanted to control the Iraqi oil. China and Russia were no friends of the United States in that time period either, but they did not prevent the Iraqi government from dealing with these countries. So, in a nutshell, it is logical to assume that oil was indeed a factor when the Bush administration decided to invade Iraq, but by no means was it a sole or perhaps even a deciding factor. Perhaps the single biggest reason for wars in the Middle East is sectarian division on ethnic or religious lines. Many commentators blame this phenomenon on the artificial borders drawn by the colonial powers of Britain and France in the aftermath of World War I, which failed to take into consideration the ethnic and religious differences, setting the stage for conflicts in this region. However, more recently, scholars have deemed this explanation of sectarian strife in the Middle East as overly simplistic. First of all, the borders as we know them today started being drawn after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire allowed for a relative freedom of movement of communities, which meant that finding a heterogeneous population structure in any given area of the region was next to impossible. Thus, any border division would inevitably lead to the division of groups and the existence of different groups inside the same borders. Moreover, the current demographic outlook of Middle Eastern countries is significantly different from that of the post-World War I era. Things change, and people move for a myriad of reasons, and blaming everything on a thing that happened more than 100 years ago while ignoring many other causes of conflict in the Middle East seems too superficial. All Middle Eastern countries, excluding Israel, are predominantly Muslim, but the Islamic faith is not a monolith, and the division of Islam between Sunni and Shia denominations has been the cause of many wars. The extreme politicization of the sectarian differences, the spread of the most conservative and fundamentalist version of Sunni Islam throughout the Middle East in the form of Wahhabism, and the return of political Shiism to the arena after the Islamic Revolution in Iran have created a rather fertile environment for conflicts. Countries like Iraq and Syria have significant Sunni and Shia populations, while Lebanon is even more complex, with a roughly 50-50 split between Shia and Sunni among the Muslim population, along with large Christian and Druze communities. The rise of Iran and Saudi Arabia as geopolitical factors in the Middle East have made these sectarian differences more likely to cause conflicts. Iran acts as a protector of Shia communities in the Middle East, and whenever sectarian conflicts occur, you can be sure that Tehran is going to back the Shias. Thus, in order to counter the rise of Iranian influence in the Middle East, the Sunni powerhouse of Saudi Arabia also actively interferes in sectarian conflicts. At one point, Saudi Arabia spread Wahhabism throughout the Middle East as a tool of influence in Sunni-majority countries and to counter Iranian influence. Lately, however, the de facto leader of the kingdom, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has seemingly given up on this policy. Still, the geopolitical conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran has made the wars in the Middle East worse. For instance, the Zaidi Shia community of Yemen, led by the Houthi movement, fought several wars with the Sunni-backed government of Yemen, even prior to the Arab Spring. The destabilization caused by the revolution in Yemen ultimately led to a civil war in 2014, with the conflict caused at least partially by sectarian differences. The Iranian support to the Houthis and the direct Saudi involvement in support of the government has made the civil war only more violent and deadly. The Syrian civil war is another Middle Eastern conflict in which the sectarian factor played an important role. Along with the obvious causes of opposition to Bashar al-Assad, such as corruption, human rights abuses, and poor life standards, the fact that he was from the Alawite minority was also among the reasons for the unpopularity of his rule. ISIS rose from the vacuum of power in Syria and Iraq and relied on anti-Shia sentiments, among other things, to recruit men and spread its ideology. Iran eventually decided to support al-Assad against different Sunni opposition groups in Syria, which ultimately helped him to gain the upper hand in the civil war. The Lebanese civil war is also an example of Middle Eastern conflict caused by sectarian differences. It is another extremely complex conflict, which involves foreign actors like Israel, Syria, Iran, and many different internal groups. However, the civil war was essentially started due to the desire of the Muslim population of Lebanon to have an increased share in power. The fighting between Christian militias and the Palestinian Liberation Organization was the starting point of the Lebanese civil war. And even though the war ended in 1990, Lebanon has yet to recover from it fully. Ethnic identities have also played some role in conflicts in the Middle East. This is particularly true for the Kurdish people, who live as minorities in Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria. Kurds are considered one of the largest ethnic groups without a state, and for the past decades they have been in different levels of rebellion against these states to gain independence. Some of the conflicts mentioned in this video are also caused by other factors, like poor governance in many Middle Eastern countries. There are several exceptions, like Israel and Turkey, which have decent standards of living, and the extremely wealthy, oil-rich Gulf kingdoms. Still, most of the Middle Eastern countries are mired in problems. The standards of living are low, the governments are corrupt, and presidents tend to stay in power forever. In the early 2010s, people of Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, Libya, Yemen, and several other Arab countries rose up in hopes of more freedom, better living standards, and more say in their country's direction. But, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Poor governance caused the Arab Spring, and the inevitable instability caused by revolutions, coupled with the insistence of old elites to stay in power, topped off with foreign meddling, led to civil wars in Libya, Syria, and Yemen. Obviously, blaming these civil wars on the Arab Spring is an extremely superficial and simplistic way of explaining complex events. However, the revolutions opened a proverbial can of worms in these countries, which they still cannot find their way around. Generally speaking, each conflict has its own unique and complex set of reasons. Wars are never, or extremely rarely, caused by one single reason. It is often about one or several dominant causes brewed by a set of other secondary causes. The foreign meddling, the Israel-Palestine question, oil, ethnic and sectarian division, and poor governance are among the most common dominant causes of conflict in the Middle East. Some are already raising the alarm about future water wars due to the scarcity of this vital resource in the region. But even if another unique cause of conflict does not rear its ugly head in the Middle East, there are still many other complex causes, which, unfortunately, are likely to lead to more war. More videos on modern geopolitics are on the way. To make sure you don't miss them, please consider liking, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our videos would not be possible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.